In this episode of the Club Random Podcast, host Bill Maher engages in a dynamic conversation with guest Jordan Peterson. The conversation initially focuses on Peterson's health. He mentions being in awful pain for about 2.5 years without a clear diagnosis. The nature of the pain was relentless, preventing him from sitting down and resulting in him walking 9 to 12 miles a day for several months. The source of the suffering seemed to be a rich tapestry of issues, including an adverse reaction to benzodiazepine. Peterson also shares that his wife and daughter were battling health issues simultaneously. This leads to a discussion on the mind-body connection, which both Maher and Peterson believe in. They express discontentment with the Western medicine approach that dismisses ailments if they can't be quantified. Peterson mentions a stringent diet that's helped both his physical and psychological health, cementing their shared belief that an individual is more than just a summation of physical markers. Later, the conversation advances to the political landscape in Canada, with Maher poking fun at Canada becoming politically exciting. Peterson critiques Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau for pervasive dishonesty and applauds the satirical lens through which Canadians view politics. They highlight the current scandalous events occurring in the country, the trucker protest against vaccine mandates, and lockdown restrictions. A major contention point is the freezing of bank accounts of those supporting the protesters, an action that Peterson finds shocking. Resultantly, one of Canada's 5 major banks issued an apology. This entire incident, Peterson believes, has negatively affected Canada's international reputation. They delve into the detrimental effects of long-term sanitization and mask usage on health, sparked by reflections on the COVID-19 pandemic. The host reminisces about when he had to record his monologue in his living room due to lockdowns. They also address the negative impacts of remote learning on students, especially those less privileged. Bill Maher recounts a story where a child reacted fearfully to seeing her father without a mask. Peterson comments on the submission to mask-wearing norms in Toronto, noting how some individuals were willing to compromise personal freedom and privacy, even drawing satisfaction from using the situation to inform authorities about non-compliant neighbors. The discussion then shifts into comparing this behavior to historical examples of citizen informants in East Germany. Peterson connects this to his belief that totalitarian states arise from pervasive societal dishonesty, not merely imposed authority. He further expands on this idea using a biblical story about the towns of Sodom and Gomorrah, arguing that a society can avoid descent into chaos if a minimum of 10 individuals uphold the truth. Continuing into contemporary political dynamics, Maher questions Peterson on when he believes the political left goes too far. Peterson emphasizes that the current progressive wokeness is not an expansion of liberalism, but actually undermines it. Maher argues that traditional liberal principles, like advocating for a colorblind society, free speech, and respecting individual identity beyond their group affiliation, are being discarded or inverted. Peterson discusses the research on psychopathy, explaining the 2 core traits: predation, exploiting others, and parasitism, using others for personal advantage. Maher asks for real-life examples, but Peterson offers only historical instances. Jordan Peterson and Bill Maher engage in a rather complex conversation that revolves around behavioral and psychological topics, particularly focusing on what they describe as psychopathy and its different forms. They mention a study on subclinical psychopathy, which explores individuals who display psychopathic traits but are not entirely criminal. In this study, characteristics such as Machiavellian behavior, narcissism, and being predatory or parasitic were assessed. Machiavellian behavior and manipulation are discussed at length. Machiavellian individuals use every conversation, including innocent dialogues, to elevate their status and extract self-serving benefits. They do not use their words to communicate their truths, but rather to gain an advantage in the conversation. The conversation then takes a darker turn when Peterson discusses the dark tetrad, a psychological construct composed of Machiavellianism, narcissism, psychopathy, and sadism. They express concern that there is a high correlation between these destructive traits and left-wing authoritarianism, stating that manipulative individuals often use compassion as a camouflage to deceive the genuinely compassionate. Peterson interestingly draws a correlation between the internet and psychopathy, suggesting that our digital landscape enables psychopathic behavior and breaches societal defenses. He mentions the phenomenon of online trolls as an example, highlighting how unregulated online spaces allow people to create chaos and leverage anonymity to escape consequences. The concern arises when this fraction of individuals surpasses the 3% threshold, increasingly posing a threat to societal stability. Discussing the impacts of technology on society, Maher refers to the addictive quality of gadgets like mobile phones. He alludes to the issue of internet pornography, mentioning that 35% of internet traffic is pornographic. The conversation concludes with a playful yet revealing analysis of female preferences in pornography, evidencing a distinct interest in narratives rather than visual stimuli as seen in men. Peterson references a Google study in his explanation of the typical story of female-oriented erotica, featuring powerful, dominant male figures who are tamed by the secretly beautiful female protagonist, ultimately leading to wild sex. Maher and Peterson plunge into a robust discussion about the perception and portrayal of female sexuality, using the character dynamics in Disney's Beauty and the Beast as an analogy. Peterson points out the archetype of the subversive dude, often depicted in literature and films, who, despite not meeting traditional standards of attractiveness, wins the girl over in the end. Another topic revolves around the tendencies certain people might exhibit, basically outlining 5 characteristics: parasite, predator, Machiavellian, narcissist, and sadist. Maher, who admits to some Machiavellian qualities within himself, questions Peterson about the impact of these traits in individuals involved in public-facing roles, such as comedians or politicians. Peterson explains that these individuals are more likely to be tempted towards narcissistic sins due to their profession's inherent traits, such as extroversion. Throughout the conversation, Maher remains highly appreciative of Peterson's resilience and bravery. He ends this section on a lighter note, confusing his show dates with Peterson's, leading to a humorous misunderstanding. Each of these elements and the tangential shifts into different sponsorship endorsements creates a lively, broad-range discussion on societal perspectives, personal characteristics, product endorsements, and literary references. Peterson, who has a significant following of Muslim viewers, shares his anticipation for his visit to the UAE. He notes his excitement to engage with followers from a part of the world that he hasn't been to before. He values his interactions with Muslim thinkers, indicating that these podcasts have an extensive reach, often in the millions, and many Muslims express relief about being included in the conversation. Maher and Peterson also delve into the topic of religious fundamentalism, exploring its impacts, including the potential dangers it poses. Peterson subtly criticizes woke liberalism, implicitly suggesting it may be a form of modern fundamentalism. This leads to a broader conversation about freedom of speech, societal changes, and the shifting dynamics of public conversations in the post-9/11 era. They talk about the ironies that sometimes emerge in liberal actions, using an example of a majority Muslim school board in Minnesota refusing to participate in Pride Month. This prompts a reflection on the complexities of balancing justice and mercy, tolerance, and discrimination. The conversation then shifts to parenting and its socio-cultural implications. Peterson criticizes indulgent parenting where kids are overly pampered and uncriticized. This, he suggests, leads to a generation that grows up feeling entitled, later manifesting in unrealistic headlines in media outlets. Peterson stresses the importance of intergenerational transmission of parenting knowledge, which he believes has been severed due to older parenting age, fewer children, and larger generational gaps. He shares a personal story about helping his son manage a disciplinary problem with his grandchild. This incites a broader discussion, exploring how children think and manipulate situations. He emphasizes that determining when and how to discipline a child is complex, but crucial to their development. In this section of the Club Random podcast, Bill Maher and Jordan Peterson delve into a deep discussion about various issues ranging from personal mental health to social dynamics, from liberalism's limitations to the destructive consequences of cancel culture. Peterson presents a criticism of what he sees as a flaw in liberal philosophy. His argument centers around the concept of identities and freedoms. While it is essential to encourage freedom, he asserts that it can only function effectively within nested relationships. Freedom within context, he explains, prevents one from drifting into insanity. Peterson suggests that a person's optimal function, mental health, and psyche are intimately associated with his relationships with others. His perspective includes various types of relationships, from an intimate partner to friends, extended family, and the broader societal relationships. He further adds that these relationships keep one bounded and in line using the feedback mechanisms present in social dynamics. Essentially, Peterson suggests that our social relationships act as a scaffold that allows for personal freedom without drifting into potentially destructive directions. The conversation then shifts towards the rising trend of cancel culture. Peterson explains its devastating impact on people, observing that being canceled feels akin to experiencing a terrible court battle or severe illness. Bill Maher mirrors Peterson's sentiments and adds that there seems to be a growing segment of society whose sole focus is on canceling others, attacking their reputations, and orchestrating their social exclusion. The discussion then veers towards the impact of technology and the inability to forget, as everything is readily recorded and recalled online. They explore how this lack of forgetting is potentially damaging for individuals, especially with factors such as cyberbullying. They argue that an online communication system does not facilitate forgiveness, but instead fosters a mob mentality. They explore the biblical notion of bargaining with fate, hinting at how human beings constantly negotiate with their future. Peterson uses the example of teaching children to delay gratification by sacrificing immediate pleasure for future benefit. In this context, he views personal sacrifices as a contractual relation with the future, creating a parallelism with biblical narratives. The broadcast maintains a deep conversational tone, presenting thought-provoking viewpoints on complex issues. In this portion of the Club Random podcast, Jordan Peterson delves into a discussion of the Bible, providing a close reading and interpretation of the story of Jonah from a psychological and philosophical perspective. Peterson argues that the story of Jonah is fundamentally about upholding one's moral duty to communicate truth, no matter how uncomfortable or inconvenient. He states that if you're called upon to say something and you consciously refuse, not only will you put your well-being at stake, but potentially also that of the broader community or social structure represented metaphorically in the story by the ship. Peterson's approach to understanding such religious texts is to regard them as stories exploring profound aspects of human nature and societal functioning. Importantly, he doesn't see these stories as primitive or nonsensical, but as a rich source of insight into how our ancestors made sense of the world and encoded complex cultural knowledge. They also converse about the valuable experience of engaging with academic knowledge and the idea of bargaining with the future through sacrifice of immediate gratification. Although Maher shows skepticism towards Peterson's interpretation, he appreciates the intellectual curiosity and the depth of thought that goes into such interpretations. Peterson also comments on current societal issues, drawing parallels between the biblical story of Jonah and modern-day America. He criticizes Hollywood for its pervasive atmosphere of fear in voicing truthful stories, suggesting that creative and intellectual suppression might have severe repercussions. Maher echoes Peterson's sentiment, underlining the importance of diverse viewpoints and open dialogue in creating a more robust public discourse. Overall, this complex discussion revolves around the themes of truth-telling, moral responsibility, and the need for robust societal dialogue. This podcast episode presents Peterson's unique perspective on the interconnectedness of religious narratives, personal development, and societal health. Host Bill Maher and Jordan Peterson explore identity, relationships, childhood, and maturity by sharing personal experiences and opinions. Maher begins by expressing discomfort with a notion he's come across in various self-help books, where marriage is touted as one of the keys to happiness. He disagrees with this one-size-fits-all view of life, pointing out that being single is now more common than being married in America. He argues that preference for solitude or company is largely individual and should be respected. Peterson responds by discussing the utility of relationships, which helps an individual face life's challenges. Nevertheless, Maher argues that maintaining his sanity has more to do with his upbringing than relationships. He credits his parents and attributes his ability to thrive under adversity to their avoidance of overprotection during his childhood. Maher then pivots to discuss his school years, which he describes as filled with anxiety and fear over issues such as bullying. The host contends that these experiences prepared him for the realities of adulthood. He disparages the romanticism of junior high and high school years, addressing the emotional and physical struggles typical of adolescence. The dialogue segues into Maher, expressing gratitude for his progression into adulthood. He shares his belief that he was always meant to be where he is now, taking on the roles and responsibilities of an adult. Using the analogy of a play, he explains how he sees himself as the king and not the knight, highlighting his preference for leadership and authority over being a follower or a subordinate. Maher concludes by expressing how his decision not to have children allowed him to maintain his lifestyle and mindset. He implies this has contributed to his ability to live young, and he intends to do so until he physically can't. Peterson then asks what actually helps Maher stay sustained, despite his defiance of traditional relationship norms. Maher responds that his sister and friends, along with his freedom, have played a key role in his sustenance. Bill Maher and Jordan Peterson discuss the elements of maintaining long-lasting relationships and friendships. Maher starts the conversation with recalling his time at Cornell University in 1974, where he had no friends, let alone a girlfriend. He then contrasts his lonely experience back then with his current circle of friends, whom he has built organically over the years. He shares experiences from his social circle, which includes friends from childhood, college, his acting days in the 80s, as well as from the television shows Politically Incorrect and Real Time. Peterson further probes Maher on the reasons for his success in maintaining long-term friendships, but inability to keep long-term relationships. Maher candidly reveals that it wasn't due to failures. Instead, he wasn't interested in the success of the romantic relationships. Highlights the difference in dynamics between romantic relationships and friendships, stating he never got tired of his friends as they did not have the romantic element that complicates things and puts a time clock on most relationships when passion runs out. Peterson, however, presents a counter-narrative sharing his own experience of a resilient, romantic, long-term relationship with his wife. He vividly describes their ritual of dating, which they started up again after being apart for about 2 years due to being hospitalized in separate locations. The conversation takes a whimsical turn when he talks about having a log cabin on the roof of their Toronto home where they go up to dance, and a lingerie collection which added novelty and an element of play to their relationship. His affectionate reminiscences of their early days and his ability to see her at every age of her life provides a stark contrast to Maher's viewpoint. The tone shifts when Peterson probes into Maher's experiences, where he asserts that he, like most people, gets bored due to the lack of novelty, hence why he struggled to sustain his intimate relationships. Firstly, Peterson shares his experience of being constantly on the road due to his professional obligations. He notably recalls a moment when his wife, Tammy, decided she needed her own room while touring in order to continue undertaking the intense routine. This revelation led both of them to reflect on personal space and the importance of retaining a degree of privacy in a relationship. They explore the idea that inevitable intimacy can lead to a sense of being taken for granted, and how deprivation of each other's company can instead rejuvenate interest and maintain the spark in a relationship. The hosts highlight the common mistake many young individuals make in relationships, overloading their partners with attention and not giving them space to miss them. The two also discuss how their busy and often physically demanding schedules can impact their health and personal lives. They explore the idea of men's health and sex life as they age. There's a sense of mutual relief expressed when things still function as expected. There's a shared understanding that the standards change as one age, a fact highlighted when Maher references Fran Lebowitz's witticism about backhanded compliments given to older people about their appearance. Finally, Maher and Peterson discuss their professional commitments and the concept of public intellectualism, demonstrating their mutual passion for stand-up comedy and the idea of hosting live performances. However, Maher reveals his increasing discomfort with overseas travel, elaborating on how age and lack of adeptness with travel consequences like jet lag have made it less appealing for him. In summary, the underlying themes in this conversation focus on the realities of maintaining individuality within close relationships, the acceptance of physical aging, and challenges and joys of their professional paths. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of The Pod Slice.